If you're like me, you appreciate retro PC gaming for the inconvenience and expense. To revisit one of the most influential and experimental eras of PC gaming, we could build a big beige box solely for the Windows XP experience, but let's not. Instead, let's use a relatively modern and cheap PC as a dedicated Windows XP gaming machine. Its form factor will also double as a consoleized PC. When you've had your PC gaming fill, just put this XP console back on the shelf with your other big box games. I'm shoehorning the consoleized definition because I can. I've mentioned these machines before in my PC Master Race arcade build. That build was on Windows 7, and though versatile, it's not the genuine experience for Windows 98 to Windows XP based games. Fortunately for us, Windows XP runs very stable on these thin client PCs, well, certain models. The model I've selected is a Dell Thin Client Z class, or Z. This thin client PC is built for business-wide virtual desktop stations, so basic workstations where the heavy lifting is done on a remote server. Based on their purpose, they're pretty common in the second-hand PC market and pretty cheap if you do some shopping. This unit was complete in box for under $34. Well, it includes everything but a monitor and mouse. That's pretty close to complete. The Dell Thin Client Z class has a few subset models. We're using the Z90SW model. I think any Z90XX model would suffice, but I've only tested the Z90SW. The Z50 series is apparently for Linux enterprise distributions only. So when searching for one of these machines, get a Z90 something. Otherwise, Windows, which is the intent here, might not run at all. This is a very compact machine compared to the 20-year-old counterpart, a large beige box. It also supports a good mix of I/O, much of it still modern and in use today. Video connections are DVI and DisplayPort, so dual monitor support. Peripheral is 4 USBs, 2 on front, 2 on back, and another 2 USB 3.0. Gigabit Ethernet and 3.5mm stereo audio rounds out the package. Under the hood is a AMD GT52R 1.5 GHz processor with AMD Radeon HD 6310 integrated graphics. The latter should support up to DirectX 11. According to this PC spec graphic, it's good enough for early 2000s PC gaming, especially for late 90s. The integrated graphics card is dated to around 2010 to 2011, so I imagine we'll be just fine. Everything is passively cooled, so this unit is completely silent. There's no fear of having to replace a fan that's 10 years old down the line either. What is special is this PC's form factor: 2 full-size DDR3 RAM slots and SATA solid-state hard drive storage support. More RAM is an easy upgrade. DDR3 is cheap and abundant. I have some G-Skill RAM with these very rad heat sinks taped on. These heat sinks do stick above the case lid, so I have to remove the heat sinks. We can stick a guitar pick on the unpopulated PCB side, and this will get at the heat sink adhesive. Carefully wedging under the adhesive, I can remove these heat sinks and expose the basic RAM slots that will fit under the thin client lid. This will be 4 gigs installed, and if you're busy in the comments telling me that a 32-bit XP install will cap off at around 3 gigs, yeah, you're right, but PC gaming is about excess in some cases. A hard drive upgrade is also needed, since stock machines typically come with a 4GB flash hard drive. Again, that's for embedded or cloud-based OS installs, so we'll need to upgrade storage. With a full-size SATA interface, we do have some options, but footprint is an issue. In a previous video, I was under a budget, so a full-size SATA drive with an extension cable was all I could muster. That solution works, but it's ugly. Fortunately, half-size SATA drives like this 32GB module occasionally show up on eBay for under $20, and that's what we're going to use today. You can also use mSATA adapters to create the same thing, but this motherboard heatsink just makes things fit a bit too tight for comfort. Also, these capacitors are in the worst location for this SATA connection, so the half-size SATA is the best option here. But what about that mSATA connector on the other side of the motherboard? Sadly, Windows XP just doesn't seem to support it, so we're stuck with the half-size SATA drive. So in summary, the cost of this PC in consideration with its form factor really does sport a wide array of usable connections for desktop hardware. So to get the Windows XP install up and running, we need a monitor and everything else. Including an external DVD-ROM. Initial power on is promising. The boot menu defaults to Ethernet, SSD, and DVD-ROM in that order. I'm not sure what the BIOS password is, so I googled it, and to my surprise, there is a Dell support page that says the BIOS password for all Wise machines is Fireport. Hold down the delete key as soon as you power on the unit, and this will prompt you to the BIOS menu password. And it's true, the password is Fireport to my surprise. I'm installing Windows XP 32-bit Enterprise Edition. We're gonna update to Service Pack 2 after install. This is a pretty straightforward installation. I don't know why I captured so much footage for something so mundane, but I did. I think it's because it's nostalgia for Windows XP. That or, well, this is really part of the retro PC experience. So after install, it's time to tackle the worst part about legacy hardware and operating systems not intended for said hardware, drivers. Using the better part of a day, I found most of the drivers in various corners of the web. Just about every third-party driver repository except Dell's website helped this effort. Dell's website is not really friendly unless you're browsing their site on the machine you actually want to get drivers for. But eventually I found all the drivers I needed to get everything running spiffly. Spiffy? Fine. Like the ATI Catalyst driver, HD audio, USB 3.0, SM bus, display driver, and the ATI Southbridge driver, and so on. The network adapter was a bit trickier. I found something close, but only for Windows 7. A manual install of that driver led to the Windows Hardware Manager providing me with a somewhat descriptive name of the LAN hardware. So plugging that into Google got me to Realtek's website and a Windows XP driver that seemed to have done the job. Cool, now everything is spiffy. With everything running pretty well, not sure what the deal is with those COM ports being flagged, it's time for the obligatory performance benchmark. Ah yes, benchmarking, where the numbers are meaningless except on the internet. This is Passmark Performance Tester 6.0, which, according to some information, is old. Anyway, here's some charts and graphs. Sorry for the quality, the benchmarking software didn't give me much choice other than to export a bitmap picture of insane proportions. So like everything in life, the goal here is to have the longer bar. Our PC is in green. Keep your mindset in the realm of Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind or GTA Vice City. Both were released in 2002. These games are pretty par for the course for this PC, or at least that's what I'm hoping. Translated to Half-Life years, that's 2 years before Half-Life 2 would release. We'll compare this PC's benchmark to 4 other machines around the time, and those contenders are the HP XW9300 AMD Dual Opteron? I don't remember this. It's just FYI, this is a workstation PC. The Dell Dimension 8200 with NVIDIA GeForce 2 MX. Acer Veriton 7600, and with Intel, these numbers don't matter. And the iconic beige box Dell 4100 with a Pentium 3 and a Rage 128 Pro. I'm rooting for this one because I definitely had a rig very similar to this in the early 2000s, late 90s. Okay, yeah, and remember the green bar is our machine, the Dell Wise Z90SW. Let's get the obvious out of the way. Our solid-state drive absolutely rips compared to any basic disk hard drive of the time. The RAM is pretty substandard here, but I imagine the chipset bus is the actual bottleneck, so we're just going to make this a throwaway. But if it's quantity you want, we are fully stocked. Another obvious is compared to a workstation of the era, there's nothing impressive here for CPU power. The good news is it's not as bad as a Pentium 3, so points for being mediocre. But the real question is, can it game? Well, regarding 3D graphics performance on paper, which we'll totally take at face value, and I mean this chart, things look pretty good. There's a lot to unpack here for graphics performance, but it's just charts and graphs. Let's just load some games. Oh, before you go, I'm sure you're wondering, how does it compare to the warehouse space heater HP XW8200 workstation with dual Xenon processors and an NVIDIA Quattro PCI Express? Not very well, it's really slow. Okay, anyway, let's look at some games. Okay, first thing we'll do is, make this a console since it's console sized and it should fit in the appropriate spot. So it does, and I've hooked it up to a 4K TV through DVI, no issues there. So our first test will be the original Motocross Madness, which was one of my first experiences with 3D accelerated graphics in the Pentium 3 days. So this game really blew my mind. The tried and true Duke Nukem, this is the Duke It Out in DC expansion pack. And you can see the frame rate is over in the upper left, so just using fraps, we get pretty good frame rate with this game. This is always troublesome to get running. This is Virtua Cop 2, one of the Sega PC ports, which in any compatibility mode that I've ever ran, it just does not want to run unless you use a patch. So happy to see it working here. Here's Quake 1 original. This is just the demo running, but the demo still runs in the actual engine. It's not pre-recorded. And getting good frame rates with this for the most part until you see a lot of particle effects show up, but still. So I do have the original Chex Quest. I remember my dad begrudgingly letting me get this box of cereal that I don't like because it's gross, but because it had a free game in it. So if you listen closely, there were some sound issues with this. The sound effects just did not want to play or run it. That was bogging it down. So I made some changes. This is the MIDI music soundtrack, which is good, but then the sound effects were disabled, and this is just trial and error trying to essentially get whatever sound card that is compatible running this on XP. So Jazz Jackrabbit, on the other hand, I have the DOS install CD, and I tried it and things weren't going well, so we'll just skip over that one. Unreal Tournament Game of the Year Edition runs very well, as expected. It's always been a really good game that runs on most systems, even through Compatibility Wizard. But on basic XP install, happy to see it work here. This is something that's really good to use the network port with on a bunch of these computers. Here's the original Half-Life. The frame rate does drop when a lot's going on, but still for this PC, this performance is pretty good, especially as it is just sitting underneath my TV and I can play this on my couch. So here's Shogo Mobile Armor, which you can actually control during the scripted cutscenes. I don't know why this game is so notable. It's always covered on retro channels. It's interesting, and I can see it came from the pedigree that did the original Blood and locked at 60 frames per second. So here's Baldur's Gate 2, which is a long install of 4 discs, and cranking all these settings to max, it's still capped at 30 frames per second, and there's not a lot of stuff going on in Baldur's Gate, but this is actually how this whole thing came about. I was playing the remastered edition of Baldur's Gate on the PS4, and that game has a couple prompts to make edits to the map or mark waypoints, and when you do that, the PS4 text input comes up, and it's really kind of cumbersome. So I was thinking, is there a PC that I can just quickly get up and running that will give me the original PC experience for some of these games that the console ports just don't do it quite enough. So that's actually how this all started. Happy to see that Baldur's Gate works just fine. And here's Quake 2. No surprise here. I was having some weird issues. I was running at 1600 by 900 resolution, and this just kept wanting to run in a window, but still frame rate's really good for Quake 2. Well, everybody, that's all I have to say for this small size and package. I think this is a great PC if you're looking to get back into Windows XP or early Windows retro gaming, because essentially building the alternative, which is a big beige box, can be cumbersome. It can be hard to get all those parts and get everything back and working. So if you see one of these machines on the secondhand market for a good price, I definitely think you should get it. It's capable of running XP with good stability and good support for a lot of the games that used to run on that platform. Not really sure what this shot does. I know I need some form of it.